we heard from the Canadian Men's National Soccer Team Player Association. I'm trying to get that order right. They put out a statement on Twitter. 4 minutes later, it was pumped out by Rick Westhead of TSN, outlining some concerns. And the big takeaway was a cease and desist letter that was sent from the players. They said they felt that they had no choice but to take matters into their own hands, that they did not want the sponsors to be using their names and likeliness and image anymore until they had deals in place. One of the things that made this so challenging is that Christine Sinclair and a lot of her teammates in the lead up to this World Cup had been asked about the deal. We had heard from them before they started really ramping it up the final camps. Has a deal been signed? Is there progress? And Christine Sinclair, match day -2, I believe, before Nigeria, was asked again. And in that moment, Christine Sinclair has two ways of handling it. She can take the stage and address it specifically and say, with the eyes of the world watching, no, we don't have a deal, X, Y, Z. Here are all the things that we are frustrated with right now. But she decided, and I'm sure it was a team decision, and even if there were a few players that disagreed, Christine Sinclair speaks for this team, similar to what we just spoke about with Sam Kerr in the Canadian perspective. She decided that they were going to focus on the football, saying a deal was close. She did not want to talk about it anymore, which is what makes the timing of the press release from the men's national team players all the more interesting, because it said in the first couple of paragraphs that they had been working with the women's national team on the statement, that they didn't want to spring this on them. And then at the end of the statement, they said, in respect of the moment, and the moment being the World Cup, we are not going to address this further. We are not going to comment on this further, which you can take in a lot of different ways. I know I can speak personally. I thought it was incredibly disappointing from them to light this match, flick it on a gasoline-laden pile, and say, but we're not going to address this anymore because we don't want it to be a distraction for the women's national team at the World Cup. To me, damage done. There's a lot of avenues here to take, Ollie, but I think what we have decided that we really want to do here is just reset what we know as facts, because labor disputes are messy. They are full of every side trying to position themselves, gain public support without everyone generally knowing everything. And we don't know everything, but we're going to try and share what we do know and get our own thoughts on how we feel. I've outlined mine. How are you feeling about this whole situation?
Yeah, I mean, like, obviously we could talk about this all day. I don't really have any interest in doing
Nobody
so, to be
wants
honest. I'll just,
Nobody wants to do
Masochist.
so I'll keep it pretty brief. Like, I think at this point for me, not picking on any side over any other, I just find the whole thing to be increasingly confusing, frustrating, demoralizing, to be honest. And I think a lot of people are now feeling the same way. You know, whoever you think or whoever you feel like lending your support to, this is going on for so long. And the longer that it goes on, and I understand it's difficult to work these things through and they take time. But the longer that it goes on, the more every side of this is losing. The players are losing because they're not getting paid and they're having these distractions hang over them. The fans are losing because they're having to deal with these constant headlines around their sport when, you know, they want to watch the games, they want to be supportive of their teams. And right now this is dominating everything. The media is losing because we're having to talk about this repeatedly instead of talking about, again, the same as the fans, what we want to be talking about and focusing on, which is all the many positives that really do exist in Canadian football right now. Those are the stories we should be telling. And instead we're you know, bogged down in this much more than we would like to be. And even people who want to support the Canadian game, like partners who are now, you know, finding themselves denigrated a little bit for trying to support the Canadian game in the way that they see fit and trying to, you know, help us grow this thing, which is really disappointing. So, like, I've got a lot of respect for all of the players on these national teams. I think they absolutely have a right to have their fight for what they think is fair, for what they think this deal should look like. Everyone has that right in society when you unionize and so on and so forth. But I do have to say, reading that statement, that I question some of the advice that they're getting. I don't know where that advice is coming from, whether it's lawyers, whether it's media, whether it's other people who have their ear. But this statement, it contained a lot of, quite frankly, inaccuracies, to put it bluntly, and spent a lot of time on things that I don't think are actually really the problem here in terms of their ability to get a fair deal done. So I question where that kind of guidance and advice is coming from. But again, it's just another moment here where, I feel like we're talking about something that we don't really want to be talking about, and we're creating yet more confusion and chaos and frustration at a time where, we should be focused on the good news in Canadian soccer, which, like I said, there is plenty to talk about right now.
Gareth?
I'll start with what I don't know, then I'll pivot to what I do know, and then I'll just share some thoughts at the end of this. But in the column of what I don't fully understand about this, and part of what Ollie said that there's some inaccuracies in the statement. The one thing that I don't get is this insinuation that the previous offer that was made to the players last summer in terms of coming to a CBA, how that wasn't approved or known or whatever by the board and by the CFO. I wonder who's telling the players this, because that's the one thing that seems clear, is that the president of the organization at that time, who was a PhD in business administration, by the way, is also the chair of the board of directors of Canada Soccer. And he would have brought up these CBA negotiations in literally every meeting. Everything that I've heard from board members to people that have been on the periphery of these talks, that everyone knew what was being offered at that time. And it was just to lay down a marker with acknowledgement that further steps needed to be taken in order to make the organization more profitable and more robust from a financial perspective. So I just don't buy that from everything that I've heard, that people weren't aware what was in that offer. Quite frankly, that offer that was made last June was a superior offer to what is being has been proposed by the new administration. I wonder who's writing this on behalf of the players as well. My understanding is that some men's players are more involved in the process than others. Some are very dug in. Some have little to no interest at all. So I wonder where that's coming from. And the timing of it all, kind of going through a journalist releasing this, when from what I was told, that all parties involved in the situation, the cease and desist, were informed of this 8 weeks ago. So why does this come out right before in a crucial game played by the women in their second game of a World Cup? I just don't understand the timing. This could have been released any time over the last 8 weeks, but they chose to go through a journalist to unveil it this way, so I don't understand. What I do understand is their concerns about image rights. What people, I think, generally don't understand is this is new for the Canadian men's national team. They never had a union before. They never had a CBA before. This is their first one. And what I do know is that image rights have something to do with it. And what the Canadian Soccer Association did, my understanding is that they used the grounds of the women's CBAs. They've had 3 or 4 in terms of how many players need to be in a shot and what they can use and how they can use it. So they use that as the framework, which is generally universally accepted. What I also do know as well is all this talk and pointing fingers at other entities and money and this and that and the other. What this really boils down to is a potential landmark collective bargaining agreement that is required to be signed by both the men's team, the women's team, and the Canadian Soccer Association. There is all of one federation in the world that's been able to achieve this. And that's the United States Soccer Federation, who, by the way, last year lost $27 million. And, oh, by the way, took 6 years and multiple lawsuits to come up with their current arrangement, which then took the men's team making concessions in allowing not only pay equity, but programmatic equity to be achieved. This is difficult. It requires 3 parties. And what we don't know, back to that column, is where both teams stand on this. So what do the men's and women's national teams actually want? And what's it going to cost? This is something I would love to know, and something that has yet to be disclosed. I think that then you can kind of put the pieces together, if this was made public knowledge, about what sort of financial investments required to reach those aims and reach those goals. From an opinion perspective, what I scratched my head a little bit about the animosity that's taking place in a lot of this. It was a decision to put this into the court of public opinion, this entire process, both the women's national team and the men's national team, instead of trying to execute and try to figure this out behind closed doors. Again, the timing, when the men chose to boycott a game, which cost the federation themselves millions of dollars, I mean, they wanted a deal relatively quickly. They wanted it done within 24 hours, or they were going to boycott the game. And guess what? It was boycotted because the deal wasn't done in that sort of timing. These things are complicated. It's going to take a lot of time. And because of that, bad blood has spilled out because of it. And finally, my last thought, I think it kind of echoes the sentiments of Oliver Platt. For years, someone that's been part of the game at all levels in this country and myself, and have covered stories like this. We have literally been begging on our knees for the corporate community to step up and support Canadian soccer. That's not just the national teams, that's Canadian soccer top to bottom. We've said that's the only way that this entire ecosystem is going to grow. And we're finally at a time when sponsors are coming on board. It makes no sense to me why you'd want to bring them into some of these battles, whether it be as a collective, whether it be as individuals. Individual players have benefited from these sponsors coming to the table and paying them for their likeness and to be in commercial spots and to be in different advertising campaigns. Individual players are profiting from this. So I think it's the wrong target here. I think it needs to stop. We need more corporate involvement at all levels of the sport, of this game, in order to build this out and take things forward. And I'd hope that a different tactic is taken moving forward, because they're the ones, the sponsors, that need to be applauded for their belief in Canadian soccer at all levels and where the sport is going. And I hope, fingers crossed, that they keep the big picture in mind here and see where things are going and understand that labor negotiations, whether it's from writers and actors or baseball players or hockey players, these things are complicated, but they don't last forever. And we're all going to get through this. But hopefully we just keep our eyes on the prize for all the positive in the direction that this can go and leave some of this mudslinging behind us. That's it. Done. Rant over.
Very eloquently put, Gareth
Was
Wheeler.
it?
And
I don't know.
Because I think so. Listen, it was more gentle than I think I could have and would have been in your position. And I applaud you for lining up the facts.